In this video, I'm going to read an extract of Iron Ambition by Mike Tyson, where he speaks about how Cus D'Amato built his psychology in order for him to transform into Iron Mike. My whole life changed on June 20, 1998. Actually, it was a week later. I had been going up to see Cus for a few months, and I was listening to his promises of wealth and fame, but I wasn't all in. I didn't know how to be that guy Cus was talking about. But then, while I was back at Tyron's, we watched the replay of the first Sugar Ray Leonard Roberto Duran fight, and everything just clicked. I finally understood fighting. Both these guys were aggressive yet elusive, and they were fighting their asses off. It was breathtaking. People were applauding and going crazy. I wanted people applauding me. The whole energy in my mind and my body coalesced. I knew what happened with my life was going to happen in that ring. I thought, I'm going to dedicate my life to this. If I don't do this, I'd rather die. I wasn't supposed to be released from Tryon until October, but Cus got together with Mrs. Coleman, my social worker, and since I was 14 and so big, they decided it would be better for me to start school with the rest of the class in September. She loved Cus to death. He was one of those white guys who knew how to talk to the minorities. I should have been in the 7th grade, but they put me in 8th grade because I was too damn big and scary. It was hard to adjust at first. I'm from the gutter, from an institution, and all of a sudden, I'm a middle-class kid in a white neighborhood. You come from hell, and the next thing you know, you're in heaven. But you're still the devil. Can you believe I was 14? And I'd never seen a rose in my life, only on television. I thought only rich people had roses. The first time that I stayed over at the house, I asked Camille if I could have some, and I cut them and took them back to reform school. Is that some poor black motherfucker shit or what? I didn't know I could buy a rose for $2. I saw a rose and thought I was at Fort Knox. Right after I moved in, I stole money from Teddy Atlas's wallet. It was just a reflex. Teddy would go to Cus and say, he's got to be taking the money. Nothing was missing until he got here. Cus said, no, it's not him. In the back of my mind, I probably was planning to rob Cus too. But as I settled in and got with Cus' mission, I got that filth out of me. School was pretty awkward for me. I was so much bigger than my classmates. I was up to 210 pounds by then. When I went into my new classes, they thought I was the teacher. I felt like shit. School wasn't where I wanted to be. I was never part of that system. I only wanted to be a fighter. I didn't know many black kids at school. Maybe 20% of the school was black. And the black kids were the ones rejecting me because I was with the white family. They called me Mighty Joe Young because I was so big. I knew a couple of kids from the gym, but it wasn't easy making new friends because I was a shy guy. I made friends with some of the other outcasts there, the stoners. I'd hang out at their houses and smoke pot. Then I found out my roommate, Frankie, was into weed and would smoke together. The main reason that I hated school was that it was distracting me from my gym work. I'd wake up around 4 in the morning and do some running. Then I'll go back up to my room and do around 500 sit-ups and push-ups. Then I might do 10 sprints on the property, just running back and forth. This was all before school. The first time that Bobby Stewart's came down to spar with me after I had moved in, Cuz told him, "Don't fool with Mike. Believe me, he's improved immensely." I didn't know until later, but Bobby had been working out twice a day just to keep up with me. We started sparring and he was doing a lot better than I was, and I started crying. I was a perfectionist. If things don't go my way, my life is over. Pull the plug. That's my mentality. I was so desperate to achieve. Plus, I wanted to succeed for Cuz. For the first time in my life, someone was telling me that there was no one better than me. Cuz was as obsessive as I was about boxing. He really didn't think of anything else. He never went to the movies. He didn't watch TV shows. He didn't know who the famous entertainers of that era were. If your name wasn't John Wayne, Judy Garland, or James Cagney, he didn't know about you. All he wanted to talk about was boxing, and I was happy to pepper him with questions about all the fighters that I was reading about in the boxing encyclopedia. As I settled into the house, Cuz began to tell me how he got into boxing. In 1936, when he was 28, Cuz opened the Gramercy Gym on 14th Street in Manhattan. He wanted to perpetuate the memory of his brother, Jerry. One of Cuz's heroes was Slapsy Maxie Rosenblum, the then light heavyweight champion of the world. He saw that Maxie traveled around town in a chauffeured Rolls Royce and people treated him like a king. "After you, champ, you're going to have a chauffeured Rolls too," Cuz told me. All of a sudden, my life was mapped out after this Jewish guy, Maxie. Cuz found a big loft on 14th Street and started figuring out how to pay the $40 a month rent. Years earlier, after he saw the plans to create a big highway in the Bronx called the Bruckner's Expressway, Cuz had helped one of his friends. Knowing that there would be a lot of traffic, Cuz told his friends, who opened 4 gas stations along that stretch and made a ton of money. He was happy to pay Cuz's rent every month. There were probably 10 other gyms in town, but Cuz felt that his knowledge of boxing was considerably more than any of the other trainers, so he was confident that he would be a success. Cuz got a used ring from an old boxer, and his brothers helped him build out the rest of the gym. But it was smack in the Depression, and at first nobody came to the gym. Then one day, a committee of about 6 mothers came up to see Cuz. They pleaded with him to get their kids off the streets and out of trouble. Lower Manhattan was a tough area at that time, and there was no police, athletic league, or any positive influence in these kids' lives. The mothers had no money to pay Cuz, but he didn't care. In fact, he never charged anyone a nickel to spar in the gym for the next 30 years. On one of the reasons Cuz picked that location, aside from the cheap rent, was that he knew the best fighters came out of tough neighborhoods, and Cuz had one rule: if you did well and went pro, then he would manage you. The gym was up 3 flights of rickety stairs. If you stood at the bottom of the stairs, you could see all the way up to the top. It was like you were climbing a stairway to heaven. Once you got up to the top, there was a big hole in the door, patched with mesh wiring. And there was a huge watchdog that would smash up against the mesh, barking like crazy. Cuz always said he could determine a lot about the character of a kid who made that trek up the stairs. He even called that walk the trial. If a kid came up alone and wasn't deterred by the dog and pushed the door open and said he wanted to be a fighter, Cus knew he had something to work with. But if someone brought a kid there, it was a different story. Now, if they were brought up by somebody, I knew I had my work cut out for me, Cus said. Because that fellow didn't have the discipline or desire strong enough at that time to come up there by himself and open the door and say, I want to be a fighter. Right from the beginning, Cus wasn't satisfied with just being a trainer. He also aspired to be a manager. To be a real manager, one must know all aspects of boxing. He must know emotions, publicity, management, fighters, how to train. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. A manager must control the situation, so even if he doesn't do the things himself, he can direct how the things get done. Cus told an interviewer once, part of that job description was matchmaking. Cus was incredibly cautious with his fighters, and he always tried to match them up with someone they could beat, because an early defeat could be devastating to a boxer's psyche. I'm not in this business to get my guys massacred, he told the New York Times. Picking opponents wasn't always easy. One time, Cus was tricked and agreed to a fight with a guy from Long Island he hadn't heard anything about. Almost as soon as the bell rang, I realized my guy wasn't fighting no preliminary fighter. My guy got hit with everything and was knocked down 10 times, and I kept yelling to the ref, "Stop it, stop it," not wanting to get my guy ruined. After the fight, I went into the locker room, and my guy looks up and says, "Cus, I'm sorry I let you down." "You didn't let me down. I let you down. I overmatched you." Then I went over to collect the money and I heard the phone ring and somebody says it's a long distance call asking for the results of the match. I knew then that this white boy wasn't no amateur from Long Island. He'd been brought in from another part of the country. Cus was furious and smashed his right fist into his left palm. "I don't make any mistakes like that." Cus was happy to teach anyone how to box. At one point, he even trained some showgirls and taught them some boxing moves for a show that was being mounted. But Cus first got a reputation for training deaf and dumb boxers, or dummies, as they were called back in those politically incorrect days. He thought they were great fighters because their sense of vision was so acute. The ability to see is a fighter's biggest asset, and dummies are so much better interpreting things and responding to them instantly. Those little signs that a punch is going to be thrown, they are very hard to hit, Cus said. To work with them, Cus learned sign language. I watched him do it. It was so weird because he did it so hard and fast, almost violently. It looked like he was fighting. He also used his ability to read lips. That came in handy because by the time I got with Cus, he was nearly deaf. He used to say to me, "Let me look at you, talk to me right now." He told me that he used to look across the ring between rounds, and if the other trainer didn't have his back turned to Cus, he would figure out what the guy was telling his fighter. Cus was so known for his work with deaf and dumb fighters that boxing people started calling him Dummy Diamato. But Cus still hadn't made a dent in the boxing business, And in 1942, after 6 years at Grey Mercy, he was drafted into the army. Before he even entered the army, Cus began a strict regimen of self-discipline. Cus told Gay Tallis, "I went into the army prepared to die, but I'm sure he must have known that his bum eye would have kept him out of combat." He still began to put his body through some pretty heavy shit just to be prepared for all eventualities. He started by sleeping onto the floor of his gym. Half the time, he was sleeping on a cot in the office there, so that wasn't such a deprivation. But then he set his alarm clock to ring at random times during the night, so he conditioned himself to wake up refreshed no matter the hour. He walked out in freezing weather without a coat. Once he got in the barracks, he continued his self-mortification practices. He slept on the floor, which was handy if they did a sneaky inspection. He shaved using only cold water. Cus used to have an expression that would pop into his mind when he was in the army: "I will execute any command." And he took it to the moon. He stood at attention for hours at the time, and he practiced his salute like a madman until it was perfect. When his troop found themselves out on bivouac and flies were swarming them, making it impossible to eat, Cus made up his mind to not swat away the next insects. It turned out to be a spider, not a fly, and Cus put a piece of bread over it, closed his eyes, and ate it. Listen, I'm a weird dude today because of this guy. His whole thing was to discipline yourself to the point of rejecting pleasure. His bad eye eventually did get him out of any dangerous combat, and Cus wound up as a military police officer stateside for 3 years. He was assigned to guard some Russian deserters who were fighting for the Germans and became POWs. After a few shifts, he refused the assignments because he had compassion for the Russians who were being tormented by American soldiers. Cus was such a model soldier that they allowed him to get out of it. But Cus was even more incensed by the horrible way that black American soldiers were treated by both Southern soldiers and Northern civilians. Cus was coaching a boxing team composed mainly of black GIs, and he took them to a restaurant in Trenton, New Jersey, for a bite to eat before going to Fort Dix, where the fights were going to take place. Cus asked for a table for a party of 10. 6 of the 10 were black. The cashier pulled Cus aside and said, "We can serve you, but not them," indicating the black boxers who were in uniform. Cus freaked out and started screaming how the black soldiers were protecting people like the cashier and that he better serve them. By now, the whole restaurant was looking at him, and he had to be restrained by his fighters. They pulled Cus out of the restaurant, with him still screaming at the customers who continued to eat. When the team went to the south for exhibition, it was worse. Hotels refused to let the black boxers get a room, and Cus wound up sleeping with his black fighters in a public park. Those black fighters never forgot what Cus had done for them. That kind of segregation was par for the course then. Even for pro fighters, if black champions found themselves in a town where they didn't know anybody, then they'd had to sleep in the park and defend their title the next night. Cus was most upset by the racism of Southern soldiers. He told me a story of how he rescued his friend, a sergeant named Murphy, who was actually Italian, from a bunch of rednecks. Cus was getting some money from managing the boxing team, so he had enough to have a steady supply of cigarettes and cookies. These rednecks would come by and bum cigarettes and cookies, and Cus always gave them some. One day, the redneck showed their true colors by singing lynching songs. Cus was irate that his friend Murphy was cornered by the rednecks. So Cus got some of his black boxers and planned a mission to rescue his friend. "Do you hear what they're singing?" he told them. "We got to go get Murphy." The black soldiers were scared, but Cus persuaded them and they rescued Murphy. Cus was so proud of that. He made it sound like he was a general and he had rallied his troops and got Murphy back home safe. Cus told me he got nothing out of the army because he was already self-disciplined. At one point while I was living with him, I got a weird idea that maybe I should join the army. "What, are you crazy?" he shouted. "You want the military to think for you? You want to do everything they say? You want to go back to slavery?" That was the last time I ever mentioned that idea. And this is where we pause the extract. And as a fighter and as a martial artist, I've always looked into the psychology of a fighter. And when I think of psychology, the person that really comes to mind was always Mike Tyson. But then when you look at Mike Tyson, you realize that there is someone that's even more amazing in the person of Cus. And basically in this little series on my channel, we're going to cover the book and discover Cus some more and discover the psychology of Mike Tyson even more. So if you like this video, make sure you like, subscribe, share, do everything, and I'll see you in part 2. Hey, I'm Tenaman. I put a lot of time and effort in these videos, so if you like it, make sure you subscribe and you watch the next video. Also, I would really appreciate if you could go down in the description and donate to support Palestine and some other causes around the world. That's it. Like, subscribe, and share.